Hey everybody, thanks for joining me. Today I am going to look at a comic book that I was told all my life is a boring, stupid piece of garbage. But before we get into that, I'm with my friend Richard once again.
Greetings.
So he's here, and we've been recording a couple videos together, and he brought this. And I remember, we all know Batman Spawn when they came out. I've got I was going to say the first one, but I don't know if they released them at the same time or
These came out at the same time.
like the same time.
Yeah.
And forever, and at the time, nothing was better than the Batman Spawn by Frank Miller and Todd McFarlane, just by those two names there alone, and those two names there alone. Of course, this was the most incredible one, and I heard people say, this is the right way to do it, this is the wrong way to do it. And so I just never bothered with the boring, stupid DC version of all these people who I didn't know. How could it possibly compare to this? I will get into this one at a later date and go on a major rant about how fucking horrible it is. Pardon my language. But this one I never actually bothered to look at. Now, I did eventually a couple years ago get to kind of flip through it. And once I understood, like, it's Klaus Janson on art. And anything that's Klaus Janson is instantly worth a look.
Okay.
Because he was the inker on Frank Miller on Daredevil. And anytime you see his inks over on top of any artist, it's instantly recognizable and considered to be incredibly good. And then just by himself, he can draw, and he's got all the more fundamental artistic understandings that a lot of guys don't. I don't know, and we'll have to see as we go through it, because does any of that nonsense make it interesting to look at? Visually, it's hard to beat Todd McFarlane. Just based on the covers, I'm picking up this one. But also, like, 3 different writers. I don't know how to say this guy's last name. Doug Monk? I don't know. Chuck Dixon and Alan Grant. It took 3 guys to write this book. I mean, really?
Yeah.
And how does that even work? Like, if I'm one writer and I'm trying to write the book, but then you got to have 2 other voices adding to it. I bet this sold a ton, and they got a lot of money from it, just based on the Spawn Batman thing.
I don't even know.
But Klaus Janson, artist and colors, and you got this other guy doing the computer colors and letters and all that type of stuff. But so I've never actually read this, but you have.
I did, and I read it recently.
So what is going on?
So it starts off at where is it? Roanoke Island, North Carolina. Do you know about that colony?
Now that you mention it, it's 1587. Isn't that the one where they were starving?
It's the one where, the ship went back to England, and when
Right.
they came back, everybody was gone.
Just disappeared.
And
so it was a mystery.
And it was a mystery, and there were these things carved in, like, there was a message carved in, like, stone. I can't remember. There was some messages left behind, but nobody ever knew what they meant.
Right.
And so it was like this mystery what happened to them. Because it looked like they just left in the middle of the night. Like, stuff was left. Like, it was like they just left in the middle of something.
Right.
Like there was some big emergency and everybody just took off.
Okay, now that you mentioned that, I remember hearing some stories about how.
So growing up, it was just one of those mysterious things in history.
Yeah.
And so, like, anytime somebody incorporates that into a story, I find it interesting.
I wouldn't have never even known about that at the time, because we didn't have access to all kinds of information like we do now.
I did know about that at the time.
So yeah, you kind of have to.
Because I'm a nerd.
And so yeah, I would have never even. I'd be like, what? But now that you mentioned, I'm like, oh right, I've heard about that. I remember some stories about, like, they're talking about how they were waiting for there were some colonists there, and they were waiting for the ships to arrive because they were going to bring food that the colonists didn't have. But the people on the ships were like, we can't wait to get to the land because that's where they have all the food that they've been growing, and no one had anything.
I don't know if that's this one. But
I'm not saying that's this one, but there are stories like that where they just did not know what they were doing. They just expected to roll up and just start digging into the sand and finding gold and food, and it didn't go well.
Oh yeah, Croatoan. That's what was carved into the trees.
And that's a real thing.
Yeah, that's a happened. That's all that they could find of this colony was that Croatoan.
So I'm assuming this is text telling that the actual story. It says 3 years later, after the ship left, Laden with supplies and more settlers, the ship returned to an empty beach. Moreover, although several fires still smoldered, the settlement of Roanoke was utterly deserted. Some said even the graves were empty. The crops had not failed, game was still bountiful, and the local natives were friendly.
Now I don't know about the fire still being burning,
That'd be interesting to one way or the other.
but everything else is kind of my understanding is that
Already,
they
just based on
abandoned.
this historical realism, this is already more interesting than anything in that other stupid book. And just from an artistic perspective, I mean, it's a very rough drawing, but you can read it as Gotham City, like a dirty, ugly, scuzzy, massive city.
I was watching a Superman cartoon the other day, and he had his son Jonathan.
Yep.
And they were like flying around for the first time together. He just told him that he's Superman, and they're flying along, and he's like, "Ugh, what's that smell?" And he's like, "That's Gotham."
That's hilarious.
That was so funny.
That is super funny. So sorry, I'm not trying to skip ahead as far as what the story is.
So it backs up and says there's something else going on that they couldn't see because they.
Is this star pattern? Is this comic book? Like, this isn't anything.
That's not real.
Something built into
that's part
comic.
Of the story,
okay.
The comics.
So something happened in the past. Now we're back into modern day Gotham. And just from an artistic perspective, I can already see that this is. I don't want to say better. I can see as young me looking at this going, this is the most boring thing I've ever seen compared to McFarlane art. But I got to be honest, McFarlane's art on Batman in that book, I hate. I can't stand it. I hate almost everything about it. And so I'm kind of back and forth. Like, I know what me as a kid would have thought, but me as a grown guy with a more mature kind of understanding of the book.
Yeah, sometimes this rough stuff is like.
It's an interesting look on Spawn. He looks kind of hairy. Not like the hamburger face.
Hairy hamburger.
He is a hairy hamburger. Gross.
I mean, he's gross anyway.
So are we just pretending that Batman and Spawn just happen to exist in the same universe in this world?
Yeah, that's basically what's going on.
Okay.
And they know of each other because they run into each other and they're not happy. Okay. Not happy to be.
Because in the other book, that's the first time they ever ran into each other. Like they talk like this is the first time they met. So I'm wondering if that it is the same in
thing.
This.
They talk like this is the first time they've ever met in this, but they also talk like they've heard of each other.
Okay.
And they're not terribly fond of each other.
As much as I dislike McFarlane's Batman in that book, no one ever gets Spawn quite visually the same. It looks like it's just not the same.
Because that cape is so freaking hard to draw.
He has got a way of doing it, and Klaus Janson is a seasoned, respected professional that everyone just loves. But it's, I don't know. Again, teenage me would be looking at this going, this is boring.
I remember when I bought these, I thought the art in the other one was better. And this one just looks so rough and just.
He's very much a rough, sketchy guy. I want to do a whole separate video on this Batman Spawn. But the thing that I absolutely hated about the way McFarlane was drawing Batman is that he always drew him as this flat black shape. Not all the time, but so many times. I hate this teeth in the eyes and this just black, weird geometric shape. I hate all of this. There's not one thing about this I like, and this is McFarlane drawing Batman. This should be amazing. And then he starts drawing him kind of like regular, but I just, as a kid, I'll get into it. I was led to believe I had to think that was awesome because it should have been, but I maybe in a way these were both kind of a wasted opportunity. In a way, because this is, I've seen a lot of Klaus Janson's artwork and I like so much of it, but this is not wowing me.
Right. Yeah. This art, I bought it because it was the other version of that.
Yeah.
And I remember I kind of liked the story, but I didn't like all of the story. I liked the part that was like tied in with the Roanoke.
Yeah.
I thought that was interesting.
God, is Spawn crying at a TV? You know my problem with Spawn. He's sitting in alleyways crying all the time, and now it looks like he's crying at a TV. I mean, he's not crying, but he's got like this worried look on his face. It's just that's a great city shot. Like that feels like a Gotham. This angle on everything, like that looks really good. But from a visually stunning character like Spawn, he's really boring here. That's a great. I mean, this ink splatter. It's an interesting kind of choice to throw in the background of this.
Yeah, so this one has all kind of like this. There's like demonology kind of story. It's a supernatural.
Okay, well, with the pentagram and everything like that would make sense.
Yeah, Croatoan, there it is again.
Okay,
so it's like some evil force from the past.
Yeah, that's a great city shot. Another like down angle.
Yeah,
like
that's really
like
cool. And how the lights are just like
those little circles of lights, but it reads.
Yeah.
You know exactly. Those are cars moving down in the streets below. Little tiny panel, but it works really well. That's really interesting. So let's see. Let's compare double page spreads of Spawn and Batman. You got this one. I mean, and again, I know I was shitting on how much I didn't care for McFarlane's version. This is the best thing in this entire book. There is that shot. I think that looks so much better to me.
That reads so well.
The colors, the clearness of the artwork, everything versus that. I'm not particularly moved.
Which is fair.
He's saying his powers failed him. Do you remember why? Like it says, my powers fail me. Is something going on why he can't access his powers?
I think whatever demon thing is going on in the city is affecting him. And
okay.
What's drawn him to the city. That's why he's here. Like he's out of his city. Batman's pissed off that he's even in his city.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need you here.
Have you ever seen the Spawn Wildcats crossover? Have you even heard of it? I collected it. I read it. I hated it. And it's written by Alan Moore.
Oh, really?
I recently just reread it. It's kind of become one of my favorite books because, in my opinion, and I'm going to get into it on my own video, it's clear that Alan Moore fucking hates those characters too. And so he's writing them as absolute retard jokes. They are so stupid, and Spawn is saying the dumbest stuff. And I remember reading it because it was like a joke and it wasn't being taken seriously. Now I read it with some kind of understanding. I'm like, Alan Moore hates everything here. He hates all of this nonsense, and they're paying him through their asses outrageous sums of money. And so he's like, oh, I'm going to do whatever I want with these characters, and you're going to like it. And it was so horrible. Upon rereading it, I'm like, okay, this is actually entertaining, knowing that Alan Moore hates them.
That makes so much sense.
So I can't wait to get into those. I just see Spawn because he just feels out of character. At least if I don't care for the portrayal of Spawn too much in his own book, but at least that's who he was, and there was a vision by McFarlane. But anyone else trying to do him, very rarely is it ever done right. So now they're buddies looking at a map on the hood of his car. Because
they've come to
they've had their fight, and now they're buddies looking at maps. It's a big star cut out of it. What? Oh, he's cutting it out with his own finger.
Because he noticed the pattern in the map.
Oh, Spawn's kind of stupid. Like, we need the map.
There's the city.
That's okay. That it took me a minute to understand what I'm seeing.
Yeah, so the lights in the city have gone out.
Yes.
But these lights are actually still on.
It's like, is it flames?
No, it's the city lights. They went, whoever this evil power is, they went to great trouble to make sure that the city could light up that way so they could do whatever they're...
That's a really interesting idea. If you imagine seeing that in a movie, like a horror movie of Spawn that's actually scary and something like that happens, that could have been really cool.
Yeah,
all right.
It's like bringing the dead to life, I think.
All right. Suddenly I'm on board. Can be like a Sam Raimi Evil Dead thing. You've seen those, haven't you?
Yeah.
This is funny. This one up close, with like glasses on, skull, and some hair.
I've seen lots of old skulls.
Yeah.
We did a catacombs tour.
Oh, really?
Over in Europe, and there were so many bones down there.
I am very jealous now.
And but none of them had hair.
Right.
But I've heard that sometimes that's
is that something that hangs on?
Like there's sometimes that hangs on, and sometimes it's still like attached.
That's really interesting. This is kind of creepy. The guy gets his hands like that and jabs into his eyes. That's kind of
that's like
messed up.
Three Stooges stuff there.
For some reason, there's a giant spot of Spawn's no junk having junk, because that's the angle they thought was the good one to choose. I mean, I gotta say, for as much as I wanted to look at this with a critical eye, again, I haven't read it, but, and like maybe mature me will look at this and go, okay, this is the superior product. I can't say that it is.
It's not.
It's
like I read through it the other day because I knew I wanted to talk about it with you.
Yeah.
And at the end, I was just like, I remember liking this a lot more.
I really wish this would have been better. The demon Croatone. So here's an actual demon as named in the word that was carved into the tree.
So the demon has been summoned finally after however many years. The funny thing is, when this came out, so this had been a mystery for like 200 years, 300 years or something. Right as this comic had come out, I had read an article that they had, because there was a Croatoan tribe that lived nearby.
Oh.
And they've done some DNA analysis. And the people just went and lived with the Croatoan tribe.
Is that what it was?
Yeah, that's all it was.
That's it. That sometimes the simplest explanation tends to be the right one. But it's not fun to be like, maybe they evaporated into hell.
Right. But people still bring up this mystery. I still see people making stories out of it.
Right.
Even though the mystery's been solved.
I'm not really digging the coloring. I mean, I get that Spawn always has this like green goo coming out of him. But
the pastel pinks and purples.
Yeah, I'm not digging it. This is interesting. He kind of like waves his hand and like magically, does he set these people to rest? Maybe, sure.
Here's the thing. I read it like a week ago, and
you're like, I don't know.
I've already forgotten what the story was. I thought I was prepared for this.
Let's see what the final phrases. A city, invisible souls, lost in numbers. He gives, yet asks for nothing. A man who knows what his real face is and wears it with no apology. The kind of man I'll be. Is that Spawn talking about how cool Batman is?
Yeah.
Oh, girls, why don't you get together and kiss? Oh, it's even a double page. All right, I never knew that. Okay, well, I mean, not impressed. I wish that I wanted to be like, okay, I'm going to look at this and give it the credit that it's due. What a mess. Both of these were a mess. I'll get into this one, but
I remember buying both at the time, and I knew I would like this one more than this one, just based on the cover alone.
I love that lightning, and like it just
the cover's so good.
Yeah.
But then I remember I looked at this one a lot.
Yep.
Because I was supposed to like it.
Yes, exactly.
And I wanted to like it.
We'd fool ourselves that we liked it. Yeah, it was good.
And, like the art I liked, but the story was never. I liked this story better originally.
Yeah.
But now that I've reread it, I was just like,
I feel like Frank Miller, he's a man of extremes. He's either perfect, right on, or he's way off mark. He's never middle of the road. So to his credit, he goes for it. That's kind of just my opinion on things. There's some stuff that he's done story-wise that he just went for it, and it's just the worst thing you've ever seen. I don't know if you've seen his recent artwork.
No.
It's so atrocious. And I see a lot of people hyping him up for his recent artwork because they're saying he's doing something different. He's not sticking to what he used to do. He's pushing boundaries. He's breaking it down to its most basic forms and shapes. And it looks horrible. There's this one we'll have to look up where it's a image of Wolverine that he just did recently. And you're like, this is the same guy that drew that Daredevil 181 where Elektra was killed. It's the most beautiful, lush drawings I've ever seen. And then he does this. He's lost his mind. Or maybe he's almost like, I've heard somebody say he's daring us to hate him.
I get the, I feel like he's got money.
Oh, yes.
And so he's got what they call FU money.
Yep.
And so like he's just doing whatever.
Anything he wants.
He doesn't care.
He doesn't care. I'm going to just put out whatever I want. And I think too many people maybe or potentially are like, it's Frank Miller. He's done so much good work. So everything he does must be good. We have to acknowledge it as good. Just eliminate everything he's ever done and put his most recent work in front of you. Do you like it? No.
Yeah.
You would not. That's just theory. Everyone's got their kind of different opinions on things. Anyway, well, thank you for bringing that. I'm glad I finally got a chance to actually look at it in a little bit more detail. I know that I don't ever need to pick it up. If I ever find it anywhere, I'm like, oh, I need to pick that up. I got to see if it's worth it because I know now that it's not. So anyway, that was fun. Thank you for bringing it, Richard. And I guess that's all I've got. You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
We're good.